Coming up in our newscast tonight. On-site survey for the two Koreas railway project could start as early as this week. That's because the U.S. decided to allow an exemption to its sanctions against the regime to allow the joint inspections, and the UNSC approved limited sanctions waiver. The two Koreas applied for a UNESCO World Heritage listing together and produced positive results. Ssireum, a traditional Korean form of wrestling, is inscribed as an intangible cultural asset. Credit card transaction fees in the nation could be slashed, part of measures announced by Seoul's Financial Services Commission and the ruling party to lessen financial burden on the self-employed and small businesses. News Center begins now. It's 8 p.m. here in Korea, live from our studio in Seoul. This is Arirang News Center. Welcome to our program. I'm Daniel Che. Last week, the UN Security Council approved a limited sanction waiver for Seoul and Pyongyang's joint railway inspections. Over the weekend, it was revealed that Washington also got on board with an exemption of its own sanctions against Pyongyang. With the waivers in place, the two Koreas could begin on-site survey for the project this week. Woo Jung-hee has our top story.
The two Koreas' railway connection plan, which has been completely suspended since August, looks to gain speed with a couple of exemptions made to the international sanctions over the weekend. According to several government sources on Sunday, the U.S. decided to allow an exemption to its unilateral sanctions against North Korea for the inter-Korean rail inspections after a bilateral discussion with Seoul. This comes after the UN Security Council approved a limited sanctions waiver on its North Korea sanctions last Friday. With the breakthrough to the months-long deadlock, the two Koreas are currently discussing the schedule for a joint rail survey in North Korea, in Seoul expected to kickstart this week.
We are currently discussing the matter with the North. We are getting ready so that the joint inspections can begin this week.
For the inspections, a South Korean train and research team will be moving up north. They'll go test the western Gyeongui line first and then the eastern Donghae line. The overall process is expected to take about 20 days. Once the joint inspections are over, South Korea views that Seoul and Pyongyang will be able to hold a groundbreaking ceremony within this year as planned for linking and modernizing their rail and road networks, in that possibly in mid-December. But for the inter-Korean rail and road project to move further down the track, additional lifting of sanctions are needed both from the UN Security Council and the U.S., as the recent waivers for now apply only to the on-site survey. And that'll require further coordination between Seoul and Washington, as well as stronger signs of denuclearization from North Korea. Woo Jung-hee, Arirang News.
Again, a Chinese reconnaissance aircraft entered South Korea's air defense identification zone. According to Seoul's Joint Chiefs of Staff, the plane entered the Cadiz at around 11 a.m. today local time from the southwest of Jeju Island. It left the area some 40 minutes later and flew into Japan's air defense ID zone. Then at around 12:43 p.m., a Chinese plane re-entered the South Korean zone from the southeastern side. It headed to the northeastern side of the peninsula, then turned around and flew back, leaving the zone at nearly 4 p.m. The South Korean Air Force dispatched fighter jets immediately to track and warn the plane. This is the 7th time this year that a Chinese military jet has trespassed Korea's air defense ID zone using a similar route. A military source told Arirang News that the plane was a Y-9 recon aircraft. This afternoon, South Korea's Foreign Affairs Ministry summoned China's Minister Counselor in Seoul to express deep regret and to urge Beijing to take measures to prevent such an incident from recurring. The Defense Ministry also summoned the Chinese Defense Attaché stationed in Seoul, Major General Du Nong-yi, to deliver Korea's strong protest and to urge China not to do it again. The International Atomic Energy Agency has been preparing to maintain early level of readiness in verifying North Korea's denuclearization. During a high-level policy consultation in Seoul on Monday, the IAEA's Deputy Director General Massimo Aparo told Kang Jung-sik, South Korea's Deputy Minister for Multilateral and Global Affairs, that the agency has been making these efforts since last year to be ready when a political agreement is reached. Aparo also referred to Seoul as an important partner not only in the safeguard affairs but in the peaceful use of nuclear technology. The two sides also discussed ways to optimize the nuclear watchdog safeguard system and to bolster their cooperation. The Deputy Director General also managed to meet with Seoul's nuclear envoy Lee Do-hoon behind closed doors to discuss various matters, including North Korea's nuclear program. Ssireum, traditional Korean wrestling played on a sandpit where the contestants have to bring to the ground any part of the opponent's body above the knees. The sport has become UNESCO's newest intangible cultural heritage. What makes this accomplishment even more special is that the two Koreas jointly applied for such a listing for the very first time. Lee Ji-won tells us more.
Traditional Korean wrestling known as Ssireum was added to UNESCO's list of intangible cultural assets on Monday. At the 13th session of the Intergovernmental Committee for the Safeguarding of the Intangible Cultural Heritage, taking place in Mauritius from Monday through Saturday, Ssireum's bid was endorsed by a consensus from 24 member states on the first day of the meeting. But what's more meaningful about this is that it's the first such heritage listing to be shared jointly by the two Koreas. Initially, South Korea requested the listing of this sport in March 2016, as did North Korea a year earlier in 2015. Seoul then suggested Pyongyang for a joint bid earlier this year, which gained traction after South Korean President Moon Jae-in discussed the plan with UNESCO's Director General in October. And earlier in November, the two Koreas requested a merger of their separate bids, and seeing how both nominations share the same practices and social and cultural meanings, the committee made the unprecedented move of listing the two nominations as one. South Korea's Foreign Affairs Ministry said that the international community and UNESCO were very understanding of the two Koreas' motivation for a joint listing and viewed this as an opening to many more cultural exchanges with the North. It added that the government will continue to work together with Pyongyang and the international organization to actively list the two Koreas' joint heritage. With Ssireum newly added, South Korea now has a total of 20 intangible cultural heritages listed on UNESCO, including jultagi or tightrope walking, or the culture of Jeju's haenyeo or female divers. Seoul also shares two other heritages, including tug-of-war with other countries. North Korea now has three traditions on their list, including the song Arirang and kimchi making, which are both also on South Korea's list but not shared. Lee Ji-won, Arirang News.
Ssireum is widely enjoyed by average Joes during festivals. It still remains one of the nation's most beloved traditional sports. For the pros, it is serious business. The towering athletes devote their lives to mastering their skills in order to be the last man standing in high-pressure tournaments. One such event is the 2018 Korea Ssireum Festival held in the city of Andong. Choi Si-young takes us there.
In Korean, the winner of a Ssireum festival is called 천하장사, or the strongest person under the heavens. It's the highest honor in the sport. The Korea Ssireum Festival was held from 1983 until 2004, before it was briefly discontinued and revived by the Korea Ssireum Association in 2008. The festival this year brought together about 1,000 wrestlers and staff. The event is divided into separate tournaments for men, women, college students, and 14 invitees. From overseas, there was a total of 42 wrestlers from China, Mongolia, Russia, Spain, and New Zealand. The title of 천하장사 is awarded only once a year and separately for men and women. Players not vying for the title compete against peers of the same sex according to their weight class, of which there are three: flyweight, lightweight, and middleweight. Meanwhile, in the first week of December, the South Korean Ssireum team will be heading to Spain's Canary Islands to try out a form of Spanish folk wrestling. Canarian wrestling, known more commonly as lucha canaria, is similar to Ssireum and originates from the Spanish autonomous community near Morocco. Choi Si-young, Arirang News.
Seoul's government and the ruling party announced plans to reduce credit card transaction fees. The new set of measures are designed to help lessen the burden on small businesses, but already there are strong voices of opposition and concern coming from card companies. Kim Ho-kyun explains how the cuts expected to be implemented next year would work.
Officials from the Financial Services Commission and the ruling Democratic Party held a meeting early Monday where they reviewed the cost of credit card transaction fees. The officials found that they could save up to $1.2 billion in costs and decided to reduce a large portion of it in a way that will mainly benefit the self-employed and small businesses.
Credit card processing fees of small business owners who register above some $440,000 in yearly sales will be cut from the current 2.05% to 1.4%. Those who register sales between $880,000 to $2.6 million will see their credit card commission drop to 1.6% from the current 2.21%. Commission fees for others with an annual revenue below $44 million will be cut around 0.2%.
The Financial Services Commission claims they expect the proposed cut in credit card transaction fees to benefit a total of some 2.5 million business owners. Of them, 240,000 merchants with an annual revenue over $2.6 million will each be able to save up to $1,900 a year. In response to this, credit card firms from all over the nation expressed discontent over the announcement, claiming that more than 90% of all small-sized firms would benefit from the fee reduction. The firms called for the government to come up with an improved, more effective system. Labor unions in the industry expressed concerns over the possibility of a mass unemployment crisis from operating losses incurred by card companies, stressing they will stage protests against what they call the government's unilateral decision. Kim Mo-kyun, Arirang News.
The country's top 10 conglomerates saw their market cap fall sharply this year. The driving factors include a slowing domestic economy as well as the ongoing tariff war between Washington and Beijing. Here's Kim Ye-sung with a breakdown of the digits.
The market value of South Korea's top 10 conglomerates shrank this year by $173 billion. According to the Korea Exchange, as of last Friday, their combined market cap came to $729 billion, down 19.2% from the same period last year. Their proportion of total market cap also fell 1.6% on year to 51.3%. The data show Korea's key conglomerates, including Samsung Group, all fell by double digits. In particular, the market caps of Hanwha Group and Hyundai Motor were down nearly 35% and 30% respectively. 9 out of the top 10 conglomerates saw their market cap fall, the one exception being Hyundai Heavy Industries, whose value went up 3.9%.
Usually in a bear market, blue chip stocks fare better than small caps. Blue chip shares, though, have fallen by an amount similar to or more than the Kospi for reasons like the slowing economy, the U.S.-China trade spat, and weaker stock markets in the U.S. But the biggest reason is a gloomy outlook for Korea's leading industries, like autos and semiconductors, in which foreign investors have been selling their holdings.
So far this year, the benchmark Kospi has fallen by more than 16%, with the value of shares on the local bourse skidding to $1.4 trillion. With the global and local economies expected to slow down next year, experts say, Korean shares are unlikely to recover to their 2017 levels. Kim Ye-sung, Arirang News.
The fiscal health of South Korean companies improved slightly between July and September. This comes as equity inched up, but their debt also rose compared to last year, coupled with lackluster sales projection for the year. Kim Ji-yeon helped us look beyond the numbers.
The financial soundness of listed Korean companies improved slightly during the third quarter this year on lower debt-to-equity ratios, which are calculated by dividing a company's total liabilities by its stockholders' equity. Data released by Korea Exchange on Monday shows a debt-to-equity ratio of 585 firms on the benchmark Kospi came to around 106.6% as of September. However, their combined debt totaled $1.03 trillion as of end September, a near 5% increase since the end of last year. A firm's combined equity, meanwhile, grew by more than 6.5% to $969 billion during the same period. By sector, transportation equipment and construction firms saw their debt-to-equity ratio drop, while those related to coal, petroleum refining, and real estate soared. Although the debt-to-equity ratio recorded in September dropped by nearly 1.9 percentage points from the same period last year, it still remains above 100%, meaning there's more debt than equity when companies finance their assets. This comes amid lackluster sales recorded by Korean companies for this year. Separate data by the Federation of Korean Industry shows 7 out of 10 local small and medium-sized companies project their sales for this year to remain similar or less than that of last year, mainly due to a drop in domestic and international consumption. Although 8 out of 10 local conglomerates said they expect their sales for this year to remain similar or improve slightly compared to that of last year, none of them responded that they expected a dramatic on-year sales increase for the same reasons. Kim Ji-yeon, Arirang News.
President Moon Jae-in met with the OECD chief Angel Korea today and promised to bolster the nation's cooperation with the organization. He also called for joint efforts to promote people-centered inclusive growth. The Secretary General is in Seoul for the 6th OECD World Forum, which starts Tuesday. During their meeting, the South Korean leader pointed out the forum will help the world understand that quality of life might be more important than economic growth. Korea expressed his respect and gratitude for the progress that has been made so far in fostering peace on the Korean peninsula. He added the improvement in Pyongyang-Washington ties would not have been possible without the president's leadership. Over the weekend, a building in Seoul owned by telecom company KT Corporation caught fire, leading to property losses and causing service disruptions for millions of its users. Efforts to restore the damaged networks are still ongoing. Today, the ICT ministry promised to introduce safeguard measures before the year is up. For details, let's turn to our Yoon Jung-min.
A fire on Saturday at a KT building in Seoul's Ahyeon neighborhood damaged its communication network in much of the capital, paralyzing mobile phone and internet services as well as credit card transaction systems. The incident affected millions of KT subscribers and businesses using its lines. No casualties have been reported, but the fire caused property losses worth nearly $7 million. The mobile carrier apologized for the inconvenience and has been repairing the damaged infrastructure around the clock. As of Monday afternoon, some 98% of its internet lines and more than 80% of mobile network had been restored. It is also preparing compensation measures, including refunds on their customers' monthly bills. On Monday, the Minister of Science and ICT, Yoo Young-min, convened an emergency meeting with the country's 3 major communications providers, namely KT, SKT, and LG U+, to discuss follow-up measures and ways to minimize service disruptions in the future.
The government and telecom companies should strengthen safety measures and establish a backup system for the tunnels in case of fires and other disasters. We should actively work together to put such a system in place.
You promised to conduct thorough inspections of cable tunnels across the nation and also apologize for the shortcomings in the government's response. Meanwhile, safety authorities have been investigating the causes of the fire that broke out over the weekend. The National Forensic Service also joined the probe on Monday. Yoon Jung-min, Arirang News.
The international community is pushing to tackle climate change and work towards a low-carbon future. Unfortunately, the world's largest economies aren't pulling their weight. A report released by a global climate watchdog shows South Korea and a number of other advanced countries must take stronger action. Woo Soo-young has the full story.
South Korea needs to take bolder measures to keep up with global efforts to tackle climate change. That's according to the annual Brown to Green report, which compares the climate actions and policies of G20 countries in working towards the targets laid out in the 2015 Paris Climate Agreement. Among the world's largest economies, people in South Korea were found to use 2.4 times more energy than the G20 average, and double the country's usage rate in 1990. The report warned that current policies or nationally determined contributions of countries like South Korea could lead to damaging results. It says the global average temperature is on track to rise by 3 to 4 degrees, far higher than the envisioned 1.5 degrees above pre-industrial levels as set out under the Paris Accord. Noting South Korea had revised its greenhouse gas emission plan, but not its emissions target for 2030, the report stressed that Seoul needs more stringent policies to reduce emissions, as well as a specific plan to phase out coal.
South Korea has an export-oriented economy that's centered on manufacturing and energy-consuming industries. That's why the per capita usage rate is so high. We are gradually moving to a services-oriented economy, and the government has encouraged voluntary emissions cuts from firms, as well as a carbon trading system to restrict emissions for industries, transport, and households. However, time is needed for the effects to materialize.
It isn't only South Korea that needs to take stronger action. The report says none of the G20 countries have adequate targets that would halve global emissions by 2030, which is required to meet the Paris targets. In fact, energy-related emissions from 15 countries increased again in 2017, with 82% of the G20's energy supply coming from fossil fuels. It stressed the 1.5 degrees temperature limit calls for a rapid reduction of coal usage from the power sector, as well as the use of oil and natural gas by the year 2050. The report added that government should initiate more social dialogue and action to help affected industries and communities transition to a low-carbon and energy-efficient future. Oseong, Arirang News.
Moving on to other stories now, Temple Stay is a unique way for people to experience and learn more about Korea's Buddhism and culture. Naturally, it's high on the to-do list of foreigners who visit the nation. Bin help us soak in what the program has to offer.
Not far from Seoul is the city of Hwaseong in Gyeonggi-do province. It's the perfect location for seeing the vibrant colors of autumn and winter scenery. This is Yongjoosa Temple in Hwaseong. With a history dating back 1,700 years, the Temple Stay program offers a monastic lifestyle for visitors looking to take a break from their busy lives.
Temple Stay allows participants to experience a monk's lifestyle and learn about Korean Buddhism and its culture.
The temple runs its own program, allowing participants ways to find their inner self.
Through the program, we learn about temple etiquette, the importance of food through the practice of eating, and there's also the 108 prostration to help participants find self-esteem in their inner self.
From around 3 p.m., visitors start to filter into the temple. What brings foreigners to participate in the Temple Stay program? It turns out a lot of international students are interested in learning about Korean Buddhism.
I really want to explore the culture in every single way, so one way is to explore Buddhism here in the temple and to really see how the monks are living and the practices of Buddhism, which I know is quite big in Korea.
People come to the temple for different personal reasons. By coming here, they can learn about temple etiquettes, Buddha's learnings, and be a part of Korea's culture of Buddhism. As the sun sets, it's time for dinner. Temple food prohibits any meat, therefore it provides a healthy and clean meal. In Buddhism, the practice of eating, or the offering, is part of learning discipline and being grateful for the food given. By understanding this, participants take an appropriate portion of food in their bowls.
It makes me think about food waste a lot, and I think I'll be more careful to, just eat everything that I buy and prepare.
The next day at dawn, participants take part in Yebul, a ceremony of praising Buddha by performing 108 prostrations. The 108 prostrations represent the sufferings that people experience, and although it isn't easy, the visitors do their best. By doing this, they experience a moment of enlightenment and feel an inner calm. Finally, the participants walk up the mountain in silence to connect with nature and find their inner self. Their 2 days at the temple are now over, and it's time for the participants to go back to their daily life.
Well, I try to take away some, that I can have some moments for me as well during my daily life, and as well to enjoy the moments maybe a bit more.
Away from the hustle and bustle of urban life, the Temple Stay program provides a chance to find your true self. Come and be mesmerized by the temple's breathtaking scenery and learn more about the calm and peace of Korean Buddhism. Bin, Arirang News, Hwaseong.
Time to turn to Michelle Bach at the Weather Center for the updates you'll need. Michelle, it will be a nice evening if it wasn't for the stuffy air.
That's right, Daniel. Now, ultrafine dust has spread to a lot more places in just the last couple of hours. In Seoul right now, it's at twice the normal level, but with the smog coming in tomorrow, it'll get worse. And it'll be cloudy but warm Tuesday afternoon, and other parts of East Asia can also expect some similar conditions. And the morning temperatures are looking fairly comfortable as well. Seoul starting off to 5 degrees Celsius, while Daegu and Gyeongju begins a few notches lower. And Tuesday afternoon, Seoul will top out to 13 degrees, while the southern regions like Busan and Jeju could see highs almost in the 20s. Now, pleasant mild weather continues until the weekend when the mercury will start to dip. I'll leave you with the weather conditions around the world.
That's all we have for you on tonight's edition of Arirang News Center. As always, thank you for staying with us.